Hello, good evening, everyone. You can find your seats, that would be lovely. Thank you. All right, would you mind finding a seat? Sorry, we're getting started. So I just want to start off by introducing myself. My name is Jonas Spivak. Would you mind taking a seat? All right, we'll let everyone get situated here. Hi, how are you? All right, thank you. My name is Jonas Spivak. I'm the Communications Coordinator for the Town of Bennington. I am going to be masked today just because my, I lost part of my screen there. Oh dear. My wife had a contagious respiratory illness, so just in deference to everyone, I'm going to be masked as much as possible with a broken nose. So, thank you all for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. It's a beautiful evening, but I appreciate your interest in the Wide Woods. So that is what we're here for tonight. So if you're wondering what public meeting you were at the correct one for the Wide Woods. This is a follow-up of the meeting we had last March in 2023. And at that point, many of you were probably here for that as well. We provided initial input to Corey Cregan, our county forester. We also heard from RJ Jolie, our Department of Public Works Director, as well as Eric Bishop from the Southwest Tech Forestry Program. In the interim, since that time, they developed a draft forest management plan, and that management plan has been available on the town's website in preparation for this meeting. Hopefully, some of you had a chance to see it. But even if you haven't seen it, don't worry. You're going to get an awesome presentation tonight from our new county forester, Tessa McGann. And Tessa, why don't you stand up and introduce yourself as well. And after she introduces herself, I'll briefly explain the format for the rest of the evening. Please, Tessa.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Tessa McGann. I'm wearing a mask because I'm visiting a very immunocompromised person soon. So hopefully you can hear me. I've been the Rutland County Forester for the past year, and now that Corey has moved on to greener pastures, I'm stepping into the Bennington County role, and I plan to be your county forester for the foreseeable future. So I'm really excited to get a chance to meet some of you. And just a little bit of background, I did consulting forestry work for a couple years before stepping into this role with the state. I have a master's from the University of Vermont in forestry, and I really love the Vermont woods. And you'll hear a lot more from me in a little bit.
Awesome, thank you, Tessa. So tonight, we're really going to be having Tessa. She's going to give us a deep dive into the contents of that draft plan. And then after that, we want to hear from you. There's two ways that you can give input. If you don't mind coming up and speaking verbally into the microphone, we'll be inviting you to do that after her presentation. If you're someone who does not like to speak in public, that's fine. I get it. There's some cards over there and some pens. Just grab a card and a pen, write down your question, and either leave it on the table or hold on to it, and I'll ask for them at the end. And I'll read any questions that people would rather have written. So, what is the next step after this? Once your input is given, that goes back to Tessa, and then a final plan would be the result, and we'd be looking forward to that in the fall. And for that presentation, we'll have Eric and the students, that once they'll be back, join us for their part as well. So with that, Tessa, please.
Hi again, everybody. Here to talk about Wide Woods. You know that at this point. I do want to clarify, Corey Cregan, the last Bennington County Forester, did write this plan. I will do my best to explain his reasoning, but there may be some questions that I cannot answer. I'm sorry for that. Just to get us grounded in a basic overview, we are talking about the Wide Woods, the 30 acres that are located on Middle Pownell Road, adjacent to some dense neighborhoods. Are a lot of people here from that neighborhood? Yes, like everybody. Okay, that's exciting. I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts and your input on this draft. You may know this already, but that area was acquired by the town from the YMCA camp in the 70s, and it was acquired through a combination of federal funds, state funding, and then also the local Rotary Club and local citizens who donated money, people who were committed to having this open space be present in the town of Bennington. And it's a really special open space, as I'm sure you all know. It's special to have contiguous 30 acres of forest in a town. It's a place where people can recreate, can feel the peace of being in a forest, really see nature in action, in a place where they might not otherwise be able to. This particular piece of land has had a long-standing tradition of being a place of education for the young people in the community. I'll say more about that in a second. And it also is a crucial, these pieces of forest in urban areas are really crucial for wildlife habitat and for the resilience of the larger forest landscape. They are refuges for animals and plants. They become hotspots of biodiversity that can then seed out into the wider landscape when they get the opportunity to do so. To say a little bit more about the relationship with students, this has been going on since it was a YMCA camp. It was a place for children to learn about traditional ways of life connected to the forest itself. And then since it's been purchased by the land, for decades it's been used by the Southwest Vermont Career Development Center, the Tech Center, for students to learn about forestry, to practice safely felling trees, to practice maple sugaring, learn about tree identification, and learn about silviculture, how when you cut trees, how does that impact the forest. They've also been part of this process, learning about how you put together a management plan for the forest. But I do want to note this is the first time that there is a plan for this forest, which is really important, because if you have people out there cutting trees, you want to have a long-term vision. You want that to be contributing to the vision. That's what makes the difference between just cutting trees and actually doing forestry. And I want to give a shout out to RJ Jolly, the Director of Public Works, who it was his idea to do this in the first place, and it seems very much needed. Everyone's hearing me all right? Am I going too fast?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'll slow down.
And let me just say, you need to speak like right into the microphone.
Okay.
I'm on the select board, we struggle with this at all of our meetings. You've literally got to almost have your mouth up against that microphone.
Is this better? Okay, I will try to stick with this.
I'm sorry.
And so, oh no.
It's so annoying.
I'm glad you checked it. It's good to have the feedback. Okay. Okay, so just to give a very brief overview of what goes into a management plan. The first part is really you take a deep look at the forest. We describe what's there, what are the tree species, what are their sizes, their condition. We also look at other plants and animals, how are animals using the forest. We get a sense of the conditions on the ground in the forest. There's also the plan component, of course, but the other crucial part that goes into that is knowing the objectives and the goals of the landowners. In this case, that's you. A forest management plan is really about looking at what's there and then thinking about what we want to happen and then how do those two things meet. That's where the planning comes in. And always with the vision of how to do these things and make sure that there's a vibrant, healthy forest long into the future. On the note of those objectives and goals, as you said, that's you are the landowners. And there was the public hearing back in March of 2023 and the online form where people can submit comments. These have been collected. Corey read through these, listened to these. I spoke to him and he took away these 3 themes that he's incorporated into the plan. The first is that recreation is really important to this community, recreating in wide woods, finding that sense of peace, finding that connection to nature, a place to exercise, a place to improve our mental and emotional health. There were desires to keep the trails, to improve the trails, maybe to connect them to wider trail systems. There was also a fear around if we open it up too much to recreation, that there can be an impact from people who don't respect and love the woods in the same way that you do. So we heard that too. It's also really valued by the community as a place for students to learn, really valued as the outdoor classroom that it has been for the Tech Center, and also a desire to connect other students with that space, and maybe even also just educate community members, share those values and the love of the woods with people who were brought in. And then finally, Corey heard that there is not an interest in commercial logging. This community is not looking to make money off of these woods. They are also not looking to bring in large equipment that can change the woods in a drastic and sudden way, would also introduce lots of noise to the neighbors, and really visually impact the forest in a sudden way, which in turn impacts the recreational value. So these are the three themes that Corey really took away, and I hope you will see them show up in the plan. Just checking on the sound, everything good? Still understanding me? Okay. Just going a little bit into the writing of the plan. The way we find out about those on-the-ground conditions of the forest is through an inventory that was conducted in November of 2023 with students from the Tech Center. I was there to help lead students. That's the only time that I've been to Y Woods. So again, I may not be able to answer all of your questions. But Corey took that data, he took the input from the public, and he put the plan together, which we're about to get into, the exciting part. I wanted to start off by being really clear about what are the management goals that are stated in the plan. These are the goals that, some of them Corey brings as a forester, goals about really long-term health of the forest, but also the goals that he heard from you. So these are, I pretty much pulled these directly from the first page. I made some of the language less flowery, but these are the stated goals of the plan. And I'm gonna have to turn to read them. They are to enhance forest health, protect the ecological function of the forest, keep it as an outdoor classroom, and create even more educational opportunities. The goals are to support recreation, improve wildlife habitat, sustainably produce forest products, and to use this site as a demonstration site of what thoughtful forest management can look like for this community and for people around the state, for students, professionals, loggers. Have it be an educational resource in that way too. Okay, and let's start with what are the on-the-ground conditions. Here's the map that Corey made of the forest. The blue lines, that's the outline of the parcel boundary. There are black dotted lines that show some of the major trails. And then the yellow lines separate 5 different stands that Corey identified. And these stands differ in the species composition, slightly different mixes of tree species, but also some slightly different ages too. And these different conditions lead to there being different management goals, different activities that he recommends for these different parts of the forest. And just to speak really briefly to the differences. That's the computer. Okay, stand 1 is dominantly maple and beech, sugar maple and beech. Stand 2 is almost exclusively sugar maple. Stand 3, we see more red maple coming in. Stand 4, I don't know if you can see from where you are, but from the aerial you can see the density of white pine in that. It's a lot more green than the rest of the stands. And then stand 5, we see sugar maple, black cherry. There's also more pine and black birch in there too. I'm not going to spend a lot of time really describing each of these stands because I want to focus on the management recommendations. But I will give you an overview. There are a lot of conditions that are the same across these stands. So I want to talk about that because these do inform the management. So first of all, as you can see in the last map, there's a lot of sugar maple on this property. It's mostly, the dominant species is mostly sugar maple across the property, but there are other species mixed in different amounts and quantities. Those are the variations. Some of the variations that lead to the different stands. Most of this forest is roughly the same age, about 80 to 100 years old. It regrew about 80 to 100 years ago from open land, which is the story of a lot of forests in Vermont. In that time since, there hasn't been significant disturbance either from wind events, mortality of trees, or local teenagers, high schoolers coming in and thinning the forest with their teacher. Not enough opportunities to put light on the forest floor, which regenerates multiple new generations of trees. There is some in stands 3, 4, and 5. There was thinning about 30 years ago from the students that has created a new age class that's about 30 years. And there's some thinning, I think, in stand 1 that has created about a 10-year-old age class, but for the most part, the canopy of this forest is one age. Along those lines, this forest is really lacking young trees, and I'm talking about seedlings and saplings. baby trees that ideally in a forest, you have your canopy, and as branches die, wind events happen, there's some light thinning from the local high schoolers, enough light gets on the floor to start that next generation. The seeds can germinate, you get young trees and they can grow a little bit. As more things die, as more thinning happens, they can keep growing until they reach the canopy too. And that's what sustains a forest, that's what regenerates a forest. We're not seeing that here. With the exception of some beech saplings, especially in stands 1 and 2, there's not, that next generation is not in place, that really young forest. A lot of that is due to really heavy deer browse. When you have a forested area in an urban landscape, wildlife will get concentrated there. The deer are concentrated there, and they love to eat baby trees, except for beech trees. And there is evidence of heavy deer browse across this whole parcel, which contributes to that lack of seedlings and saplings. There are invasive plants present across the parcel. This is mostly concentrated in stands 4 and 5, but they are present throughout. The major offenders that Corey noted are barberry, honeysuckle, I'm forgetting one, and Norway maple. He actually didn't note the garlic mustard, and I think that's because he conducted this inventory in the fall, so it's harder. Yeah. I can just, we can return to it later. It's not really important for this part, but it is in the plan. There's another one.
We are familiar with all those invasives.
Oh, burning bush, yeah. Yeah, barberry, honeysuckle, burning bush, and Norway maple. Those are the, and then I listened to the last public meeting, and I did hear that there's a lot of garlic mustard too. So we kind of add that to the plan in the update. There's not a lot of pest and disease throughout the property. There is some, it's afflicting the beech bark disease. It afflicts beech across the state. I'll say more about that in a second. The ash is generally declining. It could be emerald ash borer, but we have been seeing ash decline across the state for a long time. It might also be from ash yellows or something else. And then the elm is afflicted by Dutch elm disease. But otherwise, it's a pretty healthy forest. The trails are at risk for erosion, and this is across the parcel. There aren't the proper features in place to help prevent erosion. Things like water bars are lacking. When Corey did the inventory, he didn't see that much active erosion except in stand 1, but he noticed that all the trails are at risk. And then on a more positive note, the thinning that the students have been doing have been giving room. They've been removing low quality trees, things that are diseased or structurally unsound, giving space, putting space on higher quality, well-formed trees of desirable species. There are areas of the forest where those trees predominate, and they have a lot of space to grow and are getting bigger, and that's awesome. All right, so what are we going to do with all this information? So I will go stand by stand for this section. So stand 1, which again is in this first, closest to the Middle Pownell Road. It's about 3 acres. Corey recommends the biggest thing is that these beech, I'll back up a little bit and talk about the beech saplings. So when beech saplings predominate, it's not from seeds falling and then getting a little light and coming out. What's really happening is the beech are stressed by a beech bark disease. And when the tree feels like it's stressed, it sends its life to the next generation, and it sends up a bunch of clones, sprouts from its roots to live on after it dies. But those beech sprouts will also be afflicted by the disease, and they will also send out a bunch of sprouts. And in the meantime, the deer are eating everything except the beech, and the beech is creating a very dense layer, low layer, that prevents other things from getting light and seeding in. And what it's tending towards is a monoculture of diseased beech, which is not a resilient forest. And we're seeing on this property, we see this everywhere, but on this property, Corey noted it mostly in stands 1 and 2. And what he's recommending is that students go in and clear some of these beech saplings. particularly in areas where there's already an opening in the canopy. And so releasing the beech in about a quarter-acre area, removing the beech in a quarter-acre area and then fencing it in to keep the deer from getting in. I'm just going to show some pictures. This is what it looks like when beech is really predominating in the understory. It can be beautiful and that neon glowing story, but it casts a lot of shade, and that's not a resilient forest right there. And this is what it looks like when you put up deer fencing. On the inside of the fence, there's a lot of trees growing, and they're growing tall, they're growing above browse height, they're gonna make it. And outside the fence, there's almost nothing. So the plan is to do that in quarter-acre areas, maybe 3 or 4 of them in the stand. Pretty small scale in the whole, and this will be done by students. He also suggests selecting 3 to 6 large trees to be legacy trees, forever trees, and marking them and mapping them so that future generations know we're not going to cut these trees ever. We're just going to let them grow. Oh, sorry. He also recommends, of course, removing the invasive plants, doing mechanical removal of those plants, and then installing all proper erosion features on the roads, on the trails that are in the stand. He also, at the end, recommends doing better mapping and marking of the trails, maybe putting up signage, and that's across the property. Okay. Stand 2, it's essentially the same thing. The only thing is this stand is larger, and so the areas where he recommends removing the beech saplings and putting up the fence go from a quarter-acre to a half-acre, so a slightly larger area. Again, 3 to 4, but not taking up more than a total acre of this stand. Everything else is the same. Oh wait, he also recommends felling and leaving some large woody material, trees that are greater than 20 inches in diameter. It's lacking from the stand, it's lacking from a lot of the property, and having this large woody material on the ground, it creates wildlife habitat, animals like to go in it, on it, eventually insects move in, that's food, fungus takes advantage of it, and as it breaks down, it gives back to the soil. Just good things to have, and things we're lacking from a lot of our forest landscape. And so, I don't know if he specifies how many trees, and that might be something we want to add, but he recommends doing a little bit of that. But then again, removing invasive plants and improving trails. Stands 3 and 4, the prescriptions are the same, so I combined them. The big difference here is these are areas where you do have that about 30-year-old cohort, and you also have a lot more Norway maple. And so in these areas, Corey is recommending doing a thinning. It's a light thinning, only removing about 10 to 20% of the basal area. That's like the density of the trees. Targeting Norway maple primarily, and then only in areas where there is a tree with a species that we think is underrepresented, that we want to see more of, or an area of young seedlings and saplings that we want them to get light and grow above browse height, or a really well-formed tree that we want around for other reasons. If those conditions exist, then lightly felling some other trees that have defects, that are diseased, that are structurally unsound. I have another picture to illustrate, which I'll jump to. So this is just, it's hard to actually illustrate on the ground what it looks like or feels like, but it's a light thinning. So imagining that in this whole forest of trees, only about that many would be removed, very roughly speaking. The rest of the treatments, again, are the same as the other stands. Selecting legacy trees and marking those, increasing the coarse woody material, removing invasives, improving trails. Stand 5, and I haven't been pointing out where these are, but you can see them now. It's pretty simple. It's just removing invasives and repairing the trails. And that's the end of the prescriptions for this plan. Again, I wanted to come back to the goals and objectives that we heard from you and hope that you can see them reflected in this plan. It's a plan that seeks to improve the trails, keep the peaceful forest nature of this land, to keep it available for recreation. Students will be doing all of the work laid out. It's not going to be any commercial harvesting. It's not going to be large machinery. Students will continue being able to learn from this work. When they put up the deer fences, those are areas where the public can come and see the impact of deer browse, learn about the forest health, the future of the forest, and again, no commercial logging. And with that, I think we will open up for questions and comments. I'm not sure how you want to handle this portion, Jim.
I'll basically let you lead this to the degree that people want to come up and ask their questions. And then at the end, I will collect any cards and I'll read those aloud and have you answer them. I did want to just briefly mention that we are recording this, so if you wonder why I was moving back and forth, I was just checking the various equipment, make sure we're successfully recording. And a copy of this slide deck of the presentation will all be on the website. So if you have neighbors or friends who are not able to be here tonight, or you want to go back and review some of the information, they'll all be available on the town website. So why don't we start? Would anyone like to come up to speak to the microphone there and ask a question or share a comment? Please.
Is that on?
It should be on today.
Yeah. Okay. Can you briefly, and if it's too long of an explanation, you can skip it. I'm curious what a management plan looks like for recreation purposes versus other purposes. Like, there's got to be some differences, and I just don't know what they are. I'm going to ask all my questions at once. Around or on the areas that are going to be fenced off, or is there going to be some sort of signage telling people what the fencing is for? Because people may be wondering what's going on. I don't know about the rest of the people that are here from the neighborhood, but if they need help pulling garlic mustard, we know how to do that. And we'll do other things too if they need help that laymen are able to do. And what's the time frame? I'm imagining this is going to take years. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't add the years to it, because some of the work is just ongoing. I think all the harvesting was scheduled for, oh boy, I think 2025, but I shouldn't just say that without checking. It says it in the plan, if you give me 1 second.
It is a 10-year plan.
Yeah, that's important to say too.
While she's looking for that, I love the idea of having signage explaining why the fencing is there, and it'll also help preserve the fencing. And it adds to the educational aspect. I don't recall that being in the plan, but I've made a note of that to include that in the revision. That's an excellent idea.
Yeah, so so the plan, the timeline is ongoing. I think that will have to be figured out with the school, since the students will be doing most of this. In the plan, it just says 2025 to 2034, so over the next 10 years, yeah. I'm glad Jonah said that about the signage. It isn't in the plan, but we do have prototypes for signage about deer fences. It's something that county foresters have put up, so we have at least a format to work with for that, and I certainly see that as being a crucial part of this, yeah. You had a question about the difference between this and a recreation plan. I don't know fully because I've never written a recreation plan. My specialty is forest management plans, but I have browsed through a few, and it's I think it's what you would figure. The focus is on much more in depth. Where would the trails be? What kinds of trails? A lot of focus on access if they're going to be building parking lots. What kinds of recreation, if they should put in mountain bike trails, things like that. So just a lot more in depth on trail systems usually, which is not what this plan does. The question about the timing, the signs, and invasives, you being willing to help out. I think that, again, that's not something that's addressed in this plan, but I do see that it seems like the interest is there in the neighborhood, and for there to be collaborations with the tech center, with other schools. It sounded like there was a desire to involve other schools in this forest. I think that would be a really good opportunity. Yeah.
Can I just add, there were 2 recreational components that were spelled out. One was that no motorized vehicles. That was very important, and that the trails need to be mapped and well marked. So that is currently in the plan. What I'm not sure about, I just don't recall, is what they decided or landed on regarding bikes as well as walking. And that is something I just don't recall, but I'll make a note of that in any case.
And again, I apologize for not, I could have read this plan with a finer tooth comb. I was really focusing on the forestry aspects, and I did breeze over and maybe missed some other aspects that are really important to you, so I'm sorry.
Other questions, please? Yep. This gentleman and then Susan.
So you have a list of management goals, are they listed in priority order?
No.
So if the recreation goal conflicts with the classroom goal, for instance, how is that resolved? Is one question, and then I have another question is, how do you assess this? If the goal is enhanced forest health, it's hard to, how do you assess that? If the goal is support recreation, how do you assess that you're doing that? Will you have meetings like this, or how is that assessed?
Those are really good questions. The first question is if there are conflicts in the priorities, how is that resolved? I don't have a clear answer for that. I think it's resolved like this. It's resolved in the community. As I'm stepping in to be your county forester, I will say that it's, and in helping manage these woods, it won't be just up to me. It'll be up to all of you. And then the question of assessing the success of meeting our goals. Generally speaking, I would come back in another 10 years and write another plan, and at that time would do an inventory and compare how the forest is looking then to the data that we have now. I'm open to other ideas of assessments and doing that with the community too. And then assessing, supporting recreation. I think that would be having meetings and hearing from you, from the neighbors, from people who use the woods, how is it going? And that would probably happen, certainly would happen the next time we update the plan, and again, would be open to that happening sooner too.
I would just add that I like the idea of having metrics to assess, and I think ideally, 10 years for forest timeline is appropriate, but for assessing how we're doing on those other metrics, that probably should be revisited more frequently. I guess maybe that's something you could look into and advise us, but my gut feeling is every school year, there's a new cohort of students working on it. So if not every year, maybe every couple of years seems like a logical time to at least check in. How are the students doing? How are we progressing on the plan? But let's include metrics to assess and suggested timelines. It's a great suggestion. Other thoughts, please.
I'm Billy, and we live nearby the area, and for many of us, we've spent hours, and many hours in that forest. There's a lot of maintenance to do. But two concerns that come up rather quickly is that when I first moved here, someone said, well, you walk by next to 303 on this little street and run somebody's private property, and you go up to the White Woods. And I said, that's kind of crazy. And as you do, it says there's no dumping. Who go this far to dump? I have no idea. So that to me seems like a very hidden access to the White Woods. Is that access going to be augmented? Is it going to have a sign that says, here's an entrance to the White Woods? You know what I'm talking about, John. Is it that right next to the, I forget her name, the real estate agent? Yeah, okay. On the other side of the White Woods, you have Middle Powell Road. I'm not sure what that area is that we used to do a lot of forestry there. Is that really, people will be able to park to come to the White Woods?
So I'll let you answer, because I don't think either of those is answered in the plan.
But if you don't have those in the plan, I'm thinking of the whole system, because my next question is the relationship to the cemetery.
So
No one ever told me that only 2 little blocks were the city. So we wandered that entire property, and we have got trails all over the place. It's delightful. But I didn't realize that we were actually on a different person's property. Go back another one. At the very beginning, you had a better site map that actually showed the extent There it is.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
enormous property that's below that upper square.
So-
It's a bit of a trail. Are you gonna have like a barbed wire fence that says, don't go here?
So let me tackle these from the first question. So this is that access
Yeah.
point off
Yeah.
Crescent Boulevard.
Yeah.
And you make a good point, it's unmarked. It basically looks like it's maintained as a part of a person's lawn.
Yeah.
So that's a good question. So we'll add that as something to look at. The primary access point, can tell you, is imagined to be down off of Morgan Street where that log landing is. So improvements to that to provide parking and access to their trails, that would be the primary location. I think I want to hear really from you guys how much we want to emphasize this entrance, because it's a great local entrance. But for the people that live there, maybe that's appropriate, but I don't know how much we would want to necessarily advertise that to the wider community. So that would be a great thing to get feedback from all of you to let me know what you think. But our primary access point is imagined to be the Morgan Street. The larger parcel that you're talking about is that large section of the woods where there was some logging done that had nothing to do with the town. That is all owned by Park Lawn Cemetery. We really have no control over that. Certainly from the town's point of view, we would never fence it off. That's not part of what we would do. I don't think there's any immediate plans of Park Lawn to do anything with that, but we can't include that in our planning. But we're certainly not going to be closing it off or closing off the Wildwoods in any way.
Yeah, because so many people like to go down towards the cemetery on the east side.
Sure, yeah.
There's a very wide path that's been used by all kinds of vehicles. And then they go to the cemetery, they walk out the other side. It's a very beautiful walk in that area.
Yeah.
So I just wasn't sure where the limitations of the city was going to go. Okay, one more thing.
Please.
Bicycles and motorcycles really don't differ. And the other day when I was talking to you, I thought I had this brilliant idea that would help keep vehicles off of our trails. Well, it fails because the bicycle and motorcycle can get through the same problem. They get through the same thing. So I know we don't want motorcycles there. I'm not sure how you do that because the motorcycles there, they come from all over the place and it's been unprotected in the past. So I wish you challenged on that.
Yeah.
Because the damage that's been done even just this past spring is just incredible.
Yeah, so
That's enough.
no, that's great, thank you. Really, especially that point about how we want to approach that Crescent Drive access point is a really good one. But once we establish these rules, we do need to aggressively follow them, especially with the no motorized vehicles one. So it's currently a problem, no question about it, and hopefully this forest plan will be the first step towards addressing that. Susan, did you have a question?
One of my concerns would be the access on Crescent, because there is no place to park.
Exactly.
You can't, Crescent is sometimes difficult to maneuver just with two cars. So that would be a real concern of mine, there's just no place to park. So that wasn't on my original list. There have been motorcycles and motorized bikes back there. The other thing that I have noticed, because our house backs up to stand 4, there must be a lot of people roaming around in the middle of the night up there because there's flashlights. And it's not frequent, I'll say that, but from time to time I'll be lying in bed and all of a sudden I see these little lights moving around up there and I'm like, okay, we just, nothing's happened. But I think that there has to be some signage saying, trails open 5:30 a.m. to 8 p.m., no motorized vehicles, etc. Things that now you have told people what can be there, when they can be there. And then, if need be, have somebody keep a closer eye on it. Because, as the gentleman mentioned, it's a shame that the trails are getting, torn up. So anyway, those are those concerns. When you say they're going to take down some trees, are they going to take some of the dead ones away that are kind of like this way towards the house? Can I mark them? Please take them down. We have a couple that are close to the house.
Yeah.
That are severely dead,
Yeah.
and are leaning one way or the other, and I just didn't know if that was in your plan.
Yeah.
You don't need to answer me, just a concern. And then, yeah, I think that's it. Oh, sustainably produced forest products. Could you further describe that to me?
Yeah, maple syrup, maybe like occasionally in a thinning, they could take a nice tree that can be turned into a park bench or
But
some
one
of
that's
that.
already gonna, one of the beech trees or something that was already gonna come down.
Or something that was coming down for the purposes I outlined of releasing younger generation, releasing a more desirable tree, things like that. But the goals of the management in this cycle are not timber production. They're not, in this 10-year plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there was definitely some excitement expressed in the plan about some maple syrup sugaring, so I think that was really
But
good.
not only from that.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I can tell you that all town recreational properties should only be open from dawn to dusk. So any evening use would be prohibited.
One thing I think to be kind of nice, when you go to Willow Park, you can talk to the city and say, I'd like to reserve a little place to have a barbecue or whatever. Is there any consideration of actually having a functional campfire or a place for education to take place? A kiosk with a backboard where a park ranger or some volunteer could give lectures on plants and vegetation? I think it's nice to be able to walk, and that's great, but so many other cities and communities have a place for education, not just education as a word. There's actually a physical place. Maybe it's got 3 benches, maybe it's got a little backdrop, maybe there's no electricity, that's okay. Something that the person could reserve and use.
I'll defer that with Eric Bishop in the Southwest Tech Forestry Program, just because, I mean, it sounds like a great idea, but I think we need to have buy-in from our educators to make sure that they would want or use something like that. Unless there was other groups in the community that saw a need for that and made a proposal for a project, then it certainly could be included. But if the primary use is going to be from the forestry department, I'd probably defer to them if they think that would be useful, but it's a really neat idea. And I'm just speaking off the top of my head, so if there's great support for that, then obviously that's something we could include as well. But I'd love to hear what Eric Bishop of the forestry program, what he thinks of that idea. Anyone else who wants to speak, please?
I was just gonna say.
Okay, speak.
Do you have
What?
provisions for dog walking?
Dogs are totally fine.
Really important. I spent years holding.
They do need to be leashed though.
And you have to pick up after them. Yeah. But it helps to have equipment for people to do
So the suggestion is dog pots, have like dog pots available or something like that. Oh, so for example, in some of our facilities, there's a place where they provide doggy bags, and there's a spot where you can deposit them, and they will be collected by the town.
No.
No, not necessarily. Just
Bring your own-
bring your own BYO.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have those at the Bass trails, and they
Yeah.
are used.
Yeah.
It's a lot of who aren't committed.
Are there anyone else who would like to speak publicly? Please.
Can I do it from here?
It's actually better for our recording equipment if you could speak at the microphone if you don't mind. Thank you.
I just wondered about trails, naming, maintenance, maybe mapping. Who would do the work on the trails to maintain them?
I think a lot of student work, especially the mapping, naming, labeling. Some of the work to prevent erosion, you would need some heavier machinery, not a big harvester, but maybe a mini bulldozer or something. And I don't know who would run that, honestly. I guess I would defer to Public Works Department on that.
I think that sort of answered the question. Is that a good enough answer? Okay, good. Although we do have a naming protocol for trails for the town now from the planning commission, so that would guide any trail name ideas they had. So it would be something, would be something within those parameters. All right, anyone else who wants to speak publicly, please?
I can answer a few questions. The flashlight could be me. I live nearby, and when it's dark, I take my dog for a walk. So I walk through woods in the dark, in the snow, whatever. So it could be dog walkers that are out there with flashlights, but I'm not out there at midnight. But it could be up to 10 o'clock at night. And then CN4, I know it's also, that's the, I didn't hear you say that you manage that part, but there's a lot of, there's a lot more, the last 3 years, maybe 4 years, a lot of the pine trees, and that's probably the trees you're talking about, that are just a mess. And some of those may be the property of the cemetery, because I know a lot of those trails are on the cemetery. The spot that you're talking about, 303 Crescent Boulevard, that is a right of way. So if you're walking around town, that is a right of way that goes between 301 and 303, and that is an entrance to the woods. It always has been, but there is no parking there. There is parking on, which is not the best parking is the parking lot that's shut off for the log landing, which is on Middle Mill Road. But there is another parking lot that was created for the boardwalk, for the swamp on Morgan Street. So you can park there and walk over, it's not convenient, but it's not that far. And then there is another parking spot that was created by Tom Steffen, but that property is going to be sold, so I don't know if there's a little spot for like 2 cars there that goes down, but that property is up for sale, so it may not have the same right of way as it did.
Well, that small cutway for Stephanie property still exists.
Right now, it's probably, it's on the road, because Tom used to mow it. Yeah, all those, so that property is Tom Steffen's property. And then the other entrance, I think we're there. But I was just concerned about all this, if they can manage those pine trees a little bit. I know they took some out, they took a few of the cemetery was out by accident a couple years ago, but, that's it. The flashlights might be dog walkers.
Thank you. Other people that want to speak? Does everyone have a card they would like me to read?
I'll speak. I just want to let everyone speak once. So if we were to hear motorized vehicles, I'm assuming we should call the police? Okay.
Yes, and I would add to that, if you get, I did speak to the police department specifically on this question, because I was informed about a caller who had gotten a response from dispatch that was like kind of along the lines of, well, what do you want us to do about it? If you get that kind of a reply, the request is to call back and ask for Lieutenant Grandy. They very much do want to hear reports of people in the woods, so please continue to call the police department if you observe that kind of activity.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. I'm curious if we were to notice something else other than motorized vehicles that we felt like someone probably should know about this. Who should we call?
Call the police department.
No, I don't mean there's anything nefarious going on. Just, a trail has really been damaged. There's
Dangerous street.
something, just nothing that anyone's gonna get arrested
Yeah,
for.
for that, I would go to the town's website, the Fix It page. There's, under the main navigation, or just on the search bar, just type in Fix It. There's also a link right on the homepage. You can report any sort of concerns or issues you see in your communities, not just for the trails in the Wildwoods, but for anything, whether it's a road issue, a parking bench that's broken, or, I'm sorry, a sitting bench or parking bench. I'm not sure what that even is. But, so yes, the Fix It form is for you to use to report any sort of concerns you might have in the community, and this seems like a perfect candidate for that.
Okay, and then you monitor that?
Correct. And
Wow, I didn't even know about that.
I and town staff monitor that, and we direct it to whatever department it needs to go
Okay.
to. So if you've got a dead skunk in the road, or whatever it is, that's there for you.
Okay, and I just want to make sure, I've never heard that the folks that own the piece of property, the cemetery-owned piece, they don't care at all that there's people on there. Is that, there's never been an issue, has there?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, okay.
So it'd be clean.
What?
They never.
I don't want people to look at
Any other
the
questions? Or do you have comments?
Or it's a question and a comment. certainly understand the concern about the dead trees, because I have that part of one of my beloved trees removed recently. As a forester, the dead trees play a very important role in the ecosystem. And I'm wondering, beyond removing trees that are obstacles or hazards, what the policy is about dead trees.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. From my reading of the plan, I don't think it was addressed, and I will say that the trees that were discussed about being cut, not dead trees. And I do know that Corey, as a forester, values having dead trees, and there's not a plan in here to clean them up. It's only removing trees that are invasive or are directly blocking trees that we really want to be released, but again, in a very light touch manner.
To the point, I don't have a problem with falling a dead tree and leaving it there. It's gonna break down, it's gonna rot down, it's gonna be good for the soil. That's perfectly fine. I just don't like it leaning that way. So if they could just and plop it, I'm okay with that. They don't have to take it out.
So the question is, trees that appear dangerous, could they be
Yeah.
dropped to be in a less dangerous position so they're not endangering nearby houses and things like that? Is that,
Or other perfectly good trees,
is that part of the management practices?
I mean, I don't think that that's laid out in this plan. Trees that are at the edges of the property and potentially dangerous to the neighbors. I don't think that we have a policy about that in this plan, but I think that's reasonable. Trees that are in the forest, leaning, dead trees that are standing but leaning but away from trails, we love to leave those. Standing dead trees provide a very different kind of habitat from the ones on the ground, and a very essential habitat. And having things look wacky and wonky in the forest, again, that structure is beloved by so many birds, so many animals. So generally speaking, we do leave it when it's not threatening a person or a valuable structure.
Other thoughts and questions? Anyone write down a comment they would like me to read? I'm not seeing any over there. I also have my business card. There's a stack of business cards over there, so if you want to grab a business card, you can email me a question. You could ask me to email you a PDF of either the slide deck or the forest management plan. That is all, of course, on the town website as well. Any other thoughts or comments? Please.
Yeah, I don't want to be a dead horse on that, and I know this is a plan and all that, but there's so much that's undefined. For instance, wildlife habitat. If you're gonna develop habitat for birds, you do it differently than if you're gonna develop habitat for mammals, small mammals or big mammals, right? So this management plan is a good start, and plans are always a good start. I'm just wondering what is the impetus, or how are you going to develop this plan, or how are you going to translate it from the document to actions on the ground? Is that you that does it as a forester, or does the town do that, or how is this going to actually move forward?
The actions that are happening on the ground, that part, I think, I see it as that has pretty much already been translated. Like, the only actions that are going towards wildlife habitat in this 10-year period are felling some large trees, creating these openings, giving a chance of young trees to grow in, which in these pockets that also creates a certain habitat. The very specific actions that we have defined in the plan. This isn't like that list of management objectives. That is not the plan. So we're not just taking that and saying, and then in the next 10 years, we'll try to achieve those. The actions are laid out in the prescriptions for each stand. And in another 10 years, if the town comes up or we see have a great idea, or there's impetus from students to really focus on small mammal habitat, then we would write that in 10 years. Or in the meantime, if something came up, we could always amend the plan. But as it stands, in terms of being translated into actions, the actions that are laid out now are what we intend to take on. And that will happen working with Eric Bishop from the tech center. Pretty much everything that's laid out here, aside from some of the repairs to trails, but the on-the-ground actions with the trees, that will happen with the tech center. And that will take coordination between me and Eric and conversations there. And but I guess I don't have a step-by-step of how that will actually happen. But I hope that answers your question somewhat.
Yeah, so you and Eric are the ones who will be answerable for this plan.
For the forestry, for the cutting of trees, for those kinds of things, yeah.
Please, come on up.
Hi, I'm just curious, as work moves forward, will there be a chance to, or is there a place to see, say on the website, activity in area or stand one, or timeframes? Thinking specifically, if I go off for a walk, I might trip over a piece of equipment or something. It just, if we know what's happening and when, we can avoid the work and not be in the way. I had a second question, which I think has been kind of answered, but would those deer fences, would they be temporary fencing, permanent fencing, and would the trails be rerouted around them, or are they going to be placed where trails are not?
They would be placed where trails are not, and it would be temporary fencing. I don't know what exact system we would use here, but what we've done as county foresters is our cedar posts and kind of a plastic mesh fencing. And it's not perfect, but it does make a big difference. So, you had another question that I think.
It was about just kind of communicating. I'm not talking like a week by week basis, but maybe, in the next 6 months or in the next 3 months, we're going to be in stand one, or this is what we hope to accomplish in stand one.
There's nothing accounting for that in the plan as it is, but I think that's a good idea, and I imagine that there's a way to communicate that. Yeah.
I'd be happy to work with Eric Bishop and the Southwest Tech so they can share as their curriculum develops what pieces they'll be working on. And I really love that idea of having signage on those areas, for whether it's for fencing, but maybe it's also in other areas as well, to alert people what they're doing. Again, just building on that educational component. So great idea.
Would you want a list of our email addresses?
Yeah, so we've sort of informally started. So yeah, what I would say is if you'd like to grab my card, send me your email address. I can create a list of local folks that want to be contacted when there's an update. And I'd be happy to do that. So or go on the Y-Woods page. There's a submission form. Make your comment. Add me to the list. And I'd be happy to maintain a list like that. I've sort of informally done that. There's a few of you I've reached out to in the community to show your neighbors, but I think that's a really great idea. I'd be happy to do that. Anything else? Other thoughts and comments? Okay, well, I was shooting for a 7 o'clock end time. Happily, we are right at 7 o'clock. But I would like to thank you all for coming out, providing this input. We will compile this. We're going to give it to Tessa and to Eric. And we look forward to, in the fall, having a revised version of this plan to come back to you with. So meanwhile, follow up on Gene's ideas, send me an email or use the submission form to get on the list. And in addition to the other ways that we communicate about these public meetings, I'd be happy to send you an email alerting you when that and other things related to the Y-Woods are coming out. So again, thank you all very much. I really appreciate you coming out.